The gods work in mysterious ways. The average high schooler may be a bit moody, but they make up for it for being the perfect host and may even answer a divine calling. This week on the podcast, join me, Zach, Walsh, and Krystal as we explore her upcoming tabletop role-playing game, A Divine Calling. Head back to high school as you fulfill the whims of the gods in an effort to keep them from being erased from this very existence. Drama and Hijinx are waiting for you right now on schedule for launch. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I'm really excited to be joined by a new creator that I've been in touch with. And I don't know how long you've been creating for Krystal. I'm going to be perfectly honest, but I'm really excited about A Divine Calling, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This is actually my first really big project. I've made one other free little game on itch, but this is my first time really kind of stepping into the scene and putting myself out there with my full game.
It's a really cool first step, too, especially because of some of the themes. There's some really neat touchstones that I think we'll be able to hop into pretty easily that kind of we're going to get into. But before we really dive into what A Divine Calling is, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Krystal. I go by Ginger Geek Gal 56 on all social media. That includes Blue Sky, Twitter, and Tumblr. I am a game designer who focuses on accessibility in my gaming, so we work really hard to make sure all of our PDFs are e-reader accessible, and that we offer large font copies as well. We also work really hard to make sure that everyone just kind of feels included. We have our mission as everyone deserves to play a game at a table, and we want to make sure that people have fun, and we want it to be intro friendly. So you're going to find that my games are very beginner friendly. You know, people who are new getting into tabletop who think D&D might be too crunchy or they don't want to play Math Finder would be able to pick up games like A Divine Calling and say, oh, well, I have 2d6 in my Monopoly box, and I could play this game.
That's awesome. I have had a couple of people who really focus on accessibility on in the past. And one of the big things that they talked about was how difficult it can be to get e-readers to work. So just for those who are looking at doing that kind of thing, what kind of stuff do you do to ensure that the games are e-reader friendly?
Of course. So you're going to want to pay for Adobe.
Yep.
I know that's just the thing that everyone's like, oh, I can just use another like PDF software. No, you want to pay for Adobe. They do have probably some of my favorite accessibility options. It will give you notifications if you're like working in Adobe. It'll say, hey, this is not e-reader friendly. This is not accessibility friendly. Let's troubleshoot it. It's really great. And then just having more than one friend who uses an e-reader or has access to people who use e-readers, multiple different types of e-readers too, helps because I've got 3 people who I can send my PDF to and say, hey, can you check this area specifically? A lot of the big issues you come across with like PDFs is tables, because tables don't always format, they don't read correctly, things like that. So making sure that people will check your tables and things like that, and even just finding ways to do things without tables, especially if you do like a table, but it's not in like a box, that tends to help a lot. So just kind of finding what the issues are and kind of focusing on them, and then reaching out to people being like, hey, I know you use an e-reader. Would you be okay to look at this and see if it works?
So if you don't mind me asking, and what drew you to wanting to ensure that your games were accessible in those sort of ways? Like, is it a friend that you have or just a lack of content?
I have always somehow managed to find a way to be friends with people who are blind. That just is what happened. Multiple of my friends actually are fully blind, and then I do have a couple friends who are just legally blind. So being able to bring games to them is what really drew me to it. And also, I just believe that everyone deserves a seat at a table, and I believe that people should be represented and should be out there so that, you know, everyone just... Tabletops are for everyone, and I cannot stress that enough. That's like my main goal is to bring tabletops to everyone, you know? I don't want them to feel like they're being gatekeeped or that they can't do it because they're not a nerd or they can't do it because it's popular. They still can. It's just
Mhm.
a matter of finding what works for you.
Yeah. I think that's so good because there are a lot of really good games out there that in table format would probably be really good for people with various accessibility
Hmm.
difficulties. But it kind of all starts at the book
Hmm.
if they can get into it. So having that option to make sure that you can dive into something accessible is it's kind of a key starting point.
Yeah. And I know like the biggest issue we've been having with our accessibility feature is something we'll probably talk about later called the web, because it is a bubble chart in the book.
Yeah.
So that's something that's been very hard to make sure is accessible. We're still obviously troubleshooting that area, but we're working really hard on it.
Hmm. Well, we've danced around it a little bit, but let's hop into it. What is a divine calling?
So, a divine calling is a introductory tabletop role-playing game where you'll be using 2d6s as your dice. You will be playing as a high schooler who has been chosen by the gods. So your entire game is about going to school, passing class, making friends, going to prom, being prom queen, being the best football player you can, all while trying to save the gods from extinction, because the big bad in this is called the Void, and they are trying to destroy all the gods and separate the world so that the world can be truly free of the gods.
It's a big ask for a high schooler.
It is a big ask for a high schooler, but the gods and the Void have found that high schoolers are much easier to influence, read that as manipulate, than adults.
That makes sense. So why the high school setting then?
I really wanted this game to be about the like chosen one trope. I grew up reading a lot of chosen one stories, so like the Hunger Games. Obviously, I read Harry Potter back when it was being released before we found out she was a TERF.
Yep.
Um, back when Harry Potter was, what we thought was good, before we, all grew up and learned better. So I read Harry Potter, I read the Hunger Games, I read the Stark to Freak series, stuff like that, and I've always really loved the chosen one trope.
Hmm.
Sadly, I never read Percy Jackson, but this would be great for anyone who does love Percy Jackson. You know, it's all about being a kid and trying to please the gods. That's basically Percy Jackson, right? From what I know.
Yeah, I mean I also haven't read. I read a little bit of Percy Jackson, couldn't get into it, but that's beside the point. It felt to me like this was very much inspired somewhere between like Percy Jackson meets Buffy is
Yes,
kind
very
of what it
much.
felt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very Buffy, very like Teen Wolf. So like the
Hmm.
idea is like in Teen Wolf, like the show, not the movie.
Yeah.
In season, I think it's 2, Scott starts falling like behind in his studies, and he's having to balance like being a lacrosse captain and passing classes and being the alpha wolf. So like
Hmm.
it's really all about that dynamic and that struggle.
Yeah. So let's get into some of those struggles though. So obviously we've talked about like passing classes and appeasing the gods or the deities that are influencing these students.
Mhm.
But what are some of the other player drives in the game?
So a lot of the player drives in this game can be very social. The game was written so that you can, if you want to, have a lot of combat. We refer to them as skirmishes.
Hmm.
So you could really just run around and beat everyone up, or you could talk your way through it. There is a very big social aspect to this game. We have 3 kind of big social mechanics. So we have, well, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3. So we have the social pyramid, which is basically a pyramid structure of the social like classes in the school. So you have the middle top, the middle bottom, and the bottom. You put each of the cliques, which is your average kind of high school character, into an area on the pyramid. Like popular kids are at the top and nerds are at the bottom, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And where you land in that pyramid will give you bonuses to talk to other people in that pyramid. So a nerd would have a bonus talking to other nerds, but they would have a bane to talking to popular kids, kind of example. You also have the web of fate, which is essentially it builds your character relationships. So when you do the web of fate, when you sit down at the table for your session 0, everyone will create 2 NPCs who are tied directly to their character, and they will make a relationship with the player character on their left and an NPC for the player character on their right. So this allows them to build kind of already having these social relationships and things like that, so that they don't just kind of come to the table in the same way you would at D&D going, hey, you meet at a tavern, or hey, you meet at the lunch table kind of situation.
Yeah.
You already know each other because you're already going to school together. Even if you're a freshman, you went to school with these kids in 8th grade and stuff like that.
It's kind of a way to integrate your character with people who are in other cliques, or like just fill out some background.
Exactly. It's very similar. The Kids On series has a mechanic for this
Yeah.
that I really liked, that I really took it kind of from, and I was like, well, they did it this way. And then I was like, well, what if I made it complicated? What if I said, hey, draw a bubble diagram for me and do it that way? And then when I playtested it, they made it even more complicated because you really only need to make 2 relationships. You need to make one for the player character on your left and the NPC for the player character on your right. And then when I first playtested it with like my personal friends, they said, what if we made relationships with every NPC and every player character? So our bubble chart was insane looking. It was just crazy. A couple of my friends got together and like they put it in Word for me, and I was like, this is the best thing you've ever done for me because I sure have it on a piece of paper.
So that's kind of one aspect we talked about. There's actually, let's get into bonuses and banes,
Yeah.
because I think they're kind of important. And that starts with your cliques.
Mhm.
So what exactly does a clique do for the character other than kind of situate them in a social standing?
Yeah, so there are, when you make your character, something that I really liked in just D&D in general is having like your race and your class. So what I did was, instead of having a race and a class, you have your clique and your deity type. Your clique represents who the character is at school. Just your normal everyday high schooler. It's who you would sit with at lunch. So you have your basic 10 cliques where it's like you have popular kids, jocks, fine art kids, overachievers, you have the stoners, you have the weaves, stuff like that. These really kind of just set you in place in your normal average everyday life.
Yeah.
Because like I said, this game is all about balance and trying to find a way to balance normal with extraordinary, fantastical elements.
Yeah.
So that's what your clique is. Your deity type, on the other hand, is the deity you work with and what abilities they give you. Deities can go into multiple types, obviously. For example, Apollo doesn't just have to be a sun god, he can be a music god, he can be for healing, any of those. So,
Mhm.
really, it's just kind of about what you want to do with the god and how you want to have your relationship.
Let's talk a little bit more about those deity types, because
Yeah.
something that I think is super key in this game is that we've used Greek gods as the examples here,
Hmm.
but it's not really that. It's very deity agnostic.
Hmm.
So when we're looking at that, there's a lot of fluidity in deities and even player characters, hosts in this game,
Hmm.
having the same deity.
Yes. So really, again, using Apollo, I tend to like to use Greek because a lot of more people know about it.
Mhm.
Most people had to learn about it in school. At least in America, you did, or at least in Texas, you did. Um, I don't know. Maybe Texas is different, and we all had to learn about Greek deities for no reason. But you take Apollo for example. You could have 3 people who work with Apollo, just working under different aspects of him. So you could
Mhm.
have a popular kid who works with Apollo, but Apollo said, here are the sun abilities. You could then have a jock who works with Apollo, who for some reason said, here are the fine arts abilities. And then another, say, a loner who works with Apollo, who said, here are the healing abilities, essentially. All
Mhm.
3 of them work with Apollo, but they all do incredibly different things.
Yeah.
Sun gods, people who have sun abilities, tend to be kind of put in a leadership position, kind of pushed forward. They have abilities to help with like speaking and kind of being a face. They also have the ability that is called Chariot, which allows them to drive better. They can also blind people with a blinding light.
Yeah.
Are people who have the health or medicine ability, obviously very good at healing, keeping people safe and things like that. And then if you were a fine arts person, you have the ability to basically like do things with like music and like rewriting even the epic itself. The entire game is called an epic. We took a lot from like the Iliad and the Odyssey when we named things.
Yeah.
Their like level 5 ability lets them completely rewrite something. They can say, that was stupid, I want to fix it. And they can say, hey, instead of rolling a horrible roll, you rolled an amazing roll and all this amazing stuff happened. And that would use their 5th level ability.
Mm-hmm. So currently there are 20 different host types, I believe,
Yes.
unless there's been more added, and those all go up to level 5.
Correct.
Pacing wise, how long would you say, how many games or sessions or that would it take to get to something like 5th level?
Yeah. So depending on how long you run your sessions and kind of how your players play, it can take as few as 5 sessions. It can take as many as 50 sessions, you know? It could take them 10 sessions to get through level 1. When I played and when we did all of our play testing, it took about 20 to 25 sessions to do a full game. But again, there's obviously rules in here for short format, which would be like a one shot or like a 2 or 3 session game. And then there's obviously rules for level 1 through 5. And this game is based on milestone. So
Yeah.
obviously you level up when the story calls for it.
Mm-hmm. It kind of works in a nice way too, because I find that looking at abilities, depending on story beats, you can have a level 1 character be nearly as efficient as a level 3 character given the right circumstances.
Correct.
Why balance the game around this way instead of just, I guess the word is power scaling?
hmm I wanted it like you always kind of have those characters in like a chosen one trope who are smaller characters who do have incredible roles. Like a great example is like Rue from the Hunger Games. She was a child. She didn't know what she was doing, yet she was able to help Katniss do all these things, and then she was sadly killed, and sadly then a more driving force like in the heart, more
Mm-hmm.
of a because of this, because of her death, I will do better kind of thing. But in the beginning, she was able to help Katniss with her tracker jacker stuff. So you really want to be able, because like the lower level characters, because all of the normal like player characters will kind of level up at the same time.
Yeah.
Ideally, I mean, you want to play a game where they don't, that's on you. I'd love to hear about it. But most of the time, a like lower level person is going to be someone who's not a player character. So it might be another host or something like that who just happens to be a high schooler with you. So having them at a lower level could work, or having them at a higher level could work.
Mhm. I guess the thing that I'd like to know now too is this story's kind of set up with the influence between the gods and the void, the deities and the void, I should say. And part of that is the main characters are being influenced by various deities, as
Mhm.
well as some NPCs if your lore weaver chooses that. But there's also the students who are being manipulated by the void.
Correct. So in this game, the void represents the characters in mythology who are cursed by the gods. Our example is always kind of Cassandra, cursed by Apollo. She was a beautiful, amazing oracle, and then Apollo said, well, no one believes you anymore. Cursed. We think about people who then would scorn the gods. The void was created out of their scorn and their hatred and their anger towards the gods, and they're just going, we don't need them anymore. Why do we still worship them? Why do we still work with them? Why care? So that anger and that hate took on its own form, became kind of sentient in a way, and became its own entity, which gives people other abilities to take down the gods. The whole driving force of the void is not to kill the host, it is to kill the gods. So there are abilities for the void to sever deities from their host and then kill that deity without killing the host in the same process. I didn't want to kill people. It felt really harsh for how lighthearted this game can feel. So I
Yeah.
felt like putting, death as like the final option was really harsh. So we went with more of a severed and now you're back to level 1 kind of situation.
Yeah. So you just mentioned it there a little bit, but what happens in the event that a host is severed from their deity?
Yeah, so what happens is, if your host is severed from their deity and the deity is not killed in 24 hours, like after you sleep, the deity comes back to you. However,
Okay.
if you are severed from your deity and your deity is killed, you level back all the way to level 1 and you have no deity. However, your lore weaver can choose to give you a deity because you're still available as a host. Anyone can be a host. Deities could hop around if they really, really wanted to. I don't recommend it, but they could.
It's an emotional finality because as you grow through your story, you also get to kind of know your host or your deity a little bit better.
Hmm. Yes, it's really kind of like very much about like loss and
Hmm.
having to deal with the loss over having to deal with being dead or having to deal with your friend being dead. It's a
Hmm.
loss of a part of you.
It's interesting to me because one of the things that I think this reminds me of is 5th edition warlocks
Hmm.
separating from their patrons.
Yes, very much so. And even kind of oath breakers in a
Yeah.
sense, I would feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that severance from a higher being.
Yeah. It's very much a like losing, and even kind of a losing kind of what makes you special, what makes you different kind of thing. All those things that like high schoolers have to struggle with, like trying to find who they are and then they think they found themselves only to find out they're not special anymore kind of situation.
I can see that kind of working really well alongside certain clicks, like the
Hmm.
loner, for instance. I feel like a loner character would handle the loss of a deity very different than like the, a fine arts student,
Hmm.
for instance.
Yeah. We never got to a point in my playtest where someone lost their deity, but a couple other playtests did run into it, and they said it really brings like a hush over the table because it's not like you're dead, and you'll have a new character. It's your character's still there. They're just not a host anymore. They're now in danger because they're not a host. They're a normal person. They have the minimum hit points, kind of situation, and it's just like this thing that everyone then has to grapple with, like, Sally lost their deity. What if I lose mine next?
Yeah, this person's vulnerable and I could be too.
Exactly.
That's such a good way of storytelling it. Let's talk mechanics for this
Yeah.
because we've talked a little bit about the host character themselves,
Hmm.
but you mentioned that it's really easy to pick up one of your games and roll a couple dice and not have to do a bunch of math. So
Hmm.
mechanically, what do things look like here?
So it's a 2d6 system. It's got critical failures, normal successes, and critical successes. The chart 1 to 3 is a critical failure, 4 to 7 is a normal failure, 8 to 11 is a regular success, and 12 plus is a critical success. It's important to note that one thing about my games that is different from like D&D or any other game with a critical failure, critical success threshold is that this does not automatically mean bad things will happen or that amazing things will happen. With our critical system, you as a table will discuss what is going to happen. So, for example, you get a critical failure. A great example I have is in Tabletop Journeys, we had a critical failure um, that the table then decided would kind of be a fail forward moment.
Okay.
The character tripped over a chair, and everyone looked at them and started laughing. This allowed another character to have a +2 on their roll to steal something. So it gave someone else a bonus while also being a failure to them. and it was something that the table specifically discussed wanting to have happen. With critical successes, it's very similar. You discuss as a table what happens. I never wanted someone to feel like the storyteller or, sorry, the lore weaver made the choice for them, because I have this very distinct memory, and this was something that almost stopped me from playing tabletops. The first time I ever played D&D, this was 4th edition. I was in college. My character got a nat 1. My DM had me backflip into a fire and took me to half health immediately at the beginning of combat.
Ooh.
I don't want anyone to ever feel like that, ever. So I wanted my critical failures and my critical successes to be just a have a conversation at the table. This is your story. Work it out together situation.
Yeah, what's a personal fill for the character, but not a slap in the face to
The whole group.
the whole group, yeah.
And there's always the thing that says, in the event you cannot come to an agreement, just treat it as a normal failure or a normal success.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's perfect. If you're playing a game like this too, you're probably not looking for those heavy-hitting, crunchy fights.
Yeah.
So, what kind of dice and stuff do people need to play this game? What's the materials?
It's a 2d6 system, so just 2d6. You can have 2d6 for the whole table or just 2d6 for each person. Again, Monopoly takes 2d6. Feel free to go steal it from Monopoly. I only say this because we play a lot of Monopoly at my house. I know that's insane to think that's the game we play, but we like Monopoly. You need 2d6. You'll have your character sheet, which will have your 4 stats. So your 4 stats are physical, mental, social, and divine. Physical is going to be all of your physical stuff: attack, defend, evade, capture, sneak, and flee. Those are the main ones. Obviously, if you're like, I want to do something and it doesn't fall into any of those categories, if it fits physical, roll physical. Mental is going to be all the things that have to do with like your knowledge and kind of thinking through things. So we have investigation, knowledge, creativity, specifically for people who are visual, literary, or culinary arts. Healing allows you to heal, and then intuition, which allows you to kind of vibe check people.
It's this game's
Social
perception
is,
check.
yeah, it is perception. Social allows you to kind of work with your words. So it allows you to like sway someone to do something, lie to them, ruin them, calm them down, or perform their heart out, which is usually for performancing arts. So like dance, music, things like that. And then divine is your specialty one. So divine allows you to use an ability. So once you get to like level 4 and 5, some of the abilities say make a divine roll. Divine, unlike the other roles and health as well, does not have critical successes or failures. You just succeed or you don't. That's it. I didn't want to put a critical on that because it just didn't feel right. It's very much a you do it or you don't kind of situation.
Yeah, it's a god intervening is a pretty big thing either
Yeah.
way.
You can do an active acknowledgement to your deity. This allows you to kind of talk with your deity, like worship them, things like that, which then in turn can make your deity feel really proud of you, and they might give you bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can tap into what you once knew, which allows you to talk to your deity, and your deity might give you help. Something that someone brought up that they thought was really funny was like deities helping you with your history homework. And so I wrote that ability in because I thought that was so funny. Like the idea of your deity being like you're in class and your teacher asks you a question, so you tap into what the deity knew, and the deity tells you, and then you tell your teacher, and your teacher's like, that's wrong. And the deity just being mad, you know? Like, I am an omnipotent being, I think I know my history, you know? But it just turns out they weren't there, you know?
There's some really good ways to play it out, and I
Mhm.
think that this game gives a lot of really good play space for people to interact with their deities and
Mhm.
that sort of thing.
And one good thing about your deity is your deity gives you an object that you can use to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
The big one that seems to always come up is everyone wants to play a stoner and then they hit their vape to talk to their deity. Like that's happened in so many playtests and just in games in general. That's like the big one. We had Hera give a scarf to one of our players, different things that allow you to just kind of talk to them. In the book, the example is a charm bracelet. So you would be able to use the charm bracelet to talk to your deity when you're not sleeping. When you're sleeping, you can talk to your deity freely. You don't have to make any rolls or anything. If you're going to talk to them using the object, you have to make a divine roll.
Yeah, it's, if I remember correctly reading everything, when you sleep, you're kind of sitting in the limbo world
Mm-hmm.
between.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I like it. It reminds me of a lot of the mid 2000s, early 2010s young adult novels in like the best way possible.
Yeah, very much. And it's also kind of like, you know, just dreams being able to connect you to like another higher being or just
Yeah.
kind of another space, dreams
hmm
just in general are kind of like this wibbly wobbly kind of thing. So,
hmm Yeah. So we mentioned skirmishing a little bit earlier,
mhm,
and it plays a little bit different than the rest of the game, like most combats do in
mhm.
role playing games. But things like turn order and how you approach fighting the void, how does that work?
So a skirmish is specifically when you would be doing like a physical fight. You wouldn't use a skirmish if you were going to like talk your way out of something, though you
Yeah.
can use social and mental and physical to all do a fight. But if someone's going to throw a punch, you go into skirmish. If you're all going to talk it through and be calm and chill about it, you don't go into a skirmish. So what you do is everyone's going to roll their 2d6. You're going to put yourselves in number order based on that.
Yep.
Ties always go to the host or a friendly NPC. So if you're fighting the void and you just also happen to have Bob, who is like a friendly NPC to y'all, is not a member of the void, and they tie with the person who is the void, Bob will go first. You can use any of your stats in a skirmish, so you can use physical, mental, or social. So if someone wants to punch them and someone wants to try and talk their way out of it, that's fine. Um, the great thing about skirmishes that I kind of took from World of Darkness is that you have an action and a reaction happening at the same time. So
Yeah.
if Bob is going to punch Julie, Bob rolls to attack. Julie can roll to defend or evade. Higher number wins.
hmm
So it's really kind of an action reaction, everything's happening at once system. And it doesn't have like phases like D&D does, you know, where you can do action, bonus action, movement. It's all kind of very fluid. So if you want to run up and punch someone and then run away, you can do that. You know, it's kind of just really kind of fluid and how the story is evolving kind of situation.
Yeah.
However, the players and the lore weaver want to work together to make it happen.
It is really about building and forming a story for you and your table, really
Yes.
creating an epic.
Yes, you want to create an epic. It's all about this game, while it does have skirmish elements, lends a lot to having more roleplay elements, and you could truly play a fully roleplay heavy game where you don't even engage in skirmishes. You can use the physical stats for things like football,
hmm
or another sport, baseball. I'm not very sporty. I used to be, but not anymore. So,
I understand that. I understand that completely.
so like if you were doing track, for example, you would use flee, your runaway ability, because you're running.
Mhm.
So, you wouldn't have to use flee to run away from combat,
Yeah.
essentially.
So at the end of the day, though, what we're getting at is Divine Calling is really about creating that epic set in a high school setting and everything that comes with that setting, be it the the difficulties of being a teenager or trying to get adults to listen to you. I guess that's another difficulty of being a teenager. But it really it can run quite episodically.
Yes.
Where was like the formation of that, or did that just kind of naturally build out as you were writing the game?
Kind of as I started writing the game, it became very apparent that the best way to write the structure was as if kind of the way like a normal session would go is you go through your class schedule, and throughout the day at school you do things like discover clues, you go to lunch, you discuss what you found, you go act on those clues. It's a
Hmm.
very simple kind of format, and using just the school day works really well because I did want to include that balance of I have to take a math test, I need to study for math, I shouldn't go chase the void till 3 a.m., kind of situation. I mean, you can. If you want to fail your math test, you fail your math test, you know. But you have people who like the overachievers who would rather they would rather the void win than fail their math test kind of situation,
Yeah.
you know. And having them deal with like loners who would rather not be at school, having to deal with that balance and putting it in like a class format gives you more structure to kind of deal with as like a lore weaver. When we started kind of playing the game, there wasn't a ton of structure, but as
Yeah.
we play tested, the structure kind of came together.
Hmm. It works really well. Where do you think that the game really shines, though, like in its key moments?
I definitely, whenever the characters sit down at lunch, that's when everyone is like, okay, we are free of the teachers. We can do whatever we want. We can talk, we can sneak around, we can go hit vapes in the bathroom, kind of situation. When they have those unstructured time moments is really where it shines. And then once they're out of class, that's when it really shines. The class kind of helps you gather evidence and stuff like that. And of course, you could get in a fist fight in class and then everyone at school will know, kind of situation if you really wanted to do that, which happens in school. People get in fist fights in classes all the time. It happened in
Oh
my high
yeah.
school, you know? So really just those moments shine the best though when they're unstructured.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's super solid. It runs really smoothly. It's simple to pick up and learn, like really simple to pick up and learn, which is great for a game like this. Something that I personally don't know though, and haven't heard too much about, is when this game is going to be coming to backing and where it's going to be funding.
Right. So we launched on October 1st. I know
Oh,
we
sad.
personally had some issues scheduling kind of at the end of
Yeah.
September. I had some family stuff come up, and it's fine. We launched October 1st on Kickstarter. Currently, we're almost 40% funded. Maybe by the end of the day, I'll get that one backer and I'll be 40% funded. We're asking for 3K. The game is 95% complete. It's important to note the game is 95% complete.
Yeah.
All that the funding is doing is paying off my artists. I paid everyone half up front. So we're paying the second half to them and then we're printing. That's it. That's all we're asking for. You know, we'll be ready. Have a delivery date of March of 2024. So we're trying to do a super quick turnaround. Everything's going really good. We're absolutely on track to be completed in time. We're looking January is when I'll start getting print copies to see and be like, oh, this is bad, let's adjust these things, and so that we get those copies before we send them out to our backers. We do also have a retail tier, so anyone who happens to run a game store who might be listening, I have a retail tier for you. And we do shipping to US, Canada, and the UK. However, if someone really desperately wants it in Australia, if you want to reach out to me at GingerGeekGal56 on Twitter and message me, I'll be happy to add your location.
I think it's also important to note that it's not like a huge amount that you're looking for. You said 40%, which depending on country or on Kickstarter could be not that much, but it's I
Yeah.
think I think the total needed is 3,000.
Yes, 3,000. We
3,000
are
USD.
currently $1,176
Yeah.
funded. We are we have quite a few different tiers, so we have a community copy available. It's a $5 PDF. You get the full color PDF, the black and white PDF, the large print PDF as well. And this is our community copy, so anyone who might be in financial hardships who really wants to still back the project, we have this for you. And we have 48 47 copies still available. And every time someone buys a physical copy, we add 2 more copies. So you're always helping out. And our retail tier gets 5 copies, so that would add 10, kind of situation.
Yeah.
We do have our PDF copy. Our normal PDF copy is $20. The soft cover, $30. The hardcover is $40. And then our retail tiers have a $90 softcover retail tier, which gets 5 softcover copies. And then the hardcover retail tier is $130, which gets 5 hardcover copies.
Mhm.
If we do have stretch goals, which will add a prom one-shot. We'll add 2 more clicks, we'll add 2 more deities, and then we'll create an alternative Art Nouveau cover if we reach all of our stretch goals.
That's super cool. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Our original cover designer is an Art Nouveau artist specifically. And so I was like, well, I could offer that as my stretch goal. So I told her, I said, if we get 15K, I'm going to commission you to do a second cover. And she was very excited about that. So
when does funding end, though?
The last day of October, so October 31st.
Oh, Halloween of October 31st.
Yes.
Sweet. Of 2023. We should also mention
Yes.
that in case you were listening to this in the future.
Yes. Hopefully in the future, you can just go buy the game.
Yep. Here's hoping for that.
We are planning, even if we do not reach funding, we will still continue to work on the game. It just won't be published as quickly.
Yeah, it won't be quite like this. It might move to somewhere like Itch, correct?
Yes. Ideally, we will offer PDFs on Itch drive-through. We are going to be using Amazon to do our fulfillment because I already have a book on Amazon.
Yep.
I have a published poetry collection on there, so I already have an account and everything set up, and they already pay me money, so it's just easier to add it there. Yeah. I understand that Amazon has a lot of issues, but that just happens to be the best fit for me.
Mm-hmm. That's totally understandable. Krystal, we are starting to run low on time here, though, so yes. I got 2 more questions for you.
Of course.
So what drives you to create in the tabletop gaming space?
I've been playing tabletop since 2012. I actually started in the LARP space. Okay. I started with World of Darkness. And then I started playing tabletops, obviously. It wasn't until probably 2016-17 that I really got into them. I had played a little bit in college, but then I started playing with my friends. We got really into Critical Role, all that stuff. I started playing other games, so like Glitter Hearts, Kids on Bikes, stuff like that, and realizing that I like these less crunchy systems, and there should be less crunchy systems out there. Everyone knows D&D. There's a D&D movie. Of course they're going to think of D&D. But then you have such amazing games like Coyote and Crow, you have Glitter Hearts, you have Kids on Bike, Monster of the Week, that are just easier to play.
Yep.
And I wanted to make a game that was easy to play and was beginner friendly because I have a lot of friends who don't play tabletop. This would allow them to play and have an easier introduction into the system.
Yeah. Krystal, that is an excellent answer. I'm glad to see you creating the space, and really the push for including more people is always positive to me. Where can people find out more about you and A Divine Calling?
Yeah, so we do have a Twitter or an X. You can find me at GingerGeekGal56. You can also find GingeGal Games on there, which is the company that I run, the gaming company. You can also find GingerGeekGal56 on Blue Sky and on Tumblr. We've not moved the game company over to those 2 yet, but we are hoping to soon.
Excellent. As always, audience, those links will be down in the description below. Go and check out A Divine Calling. From this release, I think you have 2 more weeks to go in back end. So go and show some support. This game's super cool, and I think it has a lot of options for filling out the epic that you and your friends want to create, especially those who are fans of, well, we mentioned it, Percy Jackson is a big one. My first instinct was Buffy, but it's just really good. It's really good. Go check it out. Krystal, thank you so much for joining me on the show this week.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great experience, and I'm looking forward to when I release my next game and talking to you again.
That'd be great. It'd be actually pretty awesome. So thank you. And audience, thank you so much for listening. Krystal and Divine Calling are scheduled to launch really soon. Go and help back this really incredible game. Until next time, though, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you real soon. Bye. Thank you so much to Krystal for joining me on the podcast this week. A Divine Calling is a really straightforward to play epic that works in fantastic ways. It really does set up an episodic feeling, so if you're interested in doing like a themed podcast or really enjoy the Chosen One tropes, I'd highly recommend checking this game out, as it's really good and it runs really smoothly, and the backing is ending relatively soon. As of the airing date of this episode, that's October 17th of 2023, funding's still going and it's almost halfway. I like it a lot, and I think you will too. Thank you for listening, audience. If you like what you heard, please spread the word, as it not only helps me, but it also supports the amazing creators that I get to interview on the show. If you want to hear more from me, though, you can follow me at Schedule for Launch on both Blue Sky and Twitter. I'm working on others, I promise. And you can also join me on Twitch on Thursdays as Astraceratops, like Astronaut and Triceratops. We're playing Baldur's Gate 3. It's a lot of fun. You can also catch me on Tales from the Table Studios show, One Night at Ollie's, where I'm playing Gabriel Young, surviving the horrible machines that roam that cursed amusement park for the next 2 Wednesdays of October. That's starting at 7 p.m. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you somewhere out there.